Hey, Coach Ashley here. Welcome to the first episode of our bench break. I am joined by Coach Tash and Coach Zach. And today's discussion is going to be about stretching. All right, when to stretch, how to stretch, what we should not do while we're stretching, and just all things stretching. So I think that let's go ahead. Zach, I feel like out of all three of us, is probably the go-to guy to discuss stretching, mobility, all things performance related as far as recovery goes, or even priming for performance. So I'm just going to hand it right off to Coach Zach, and you're going to deep dive into this and lead us probably through this discussion.
Stretching. All right, a lot of misconceptions with stretching. When to stretch, how to do it properly, what's the goal with stretching. First step, when to stretch. There's a difference between static stretching, the stretching where you just kind of reach for your toes and hold that, or do like a long quad stretch. Never do that before you train. You're lengthening the muscle, you're gonna be weakening that muscle and be able to cause more injuries due to your training. You won't actually get as much out from your training if you static stretch before. So what you wanna do is you wanna do more of a dynamic stretch, like we just did a 90-90 hip flow. Check YouTube, we got those on there. You wanna do more of a movement stretch. And if you wanna even go further, then it's about priming the body for what you're gonna train. So it's best to actually stretch the body using similar movement patterns that you will be doing in your actual training. That's a little bit more advanced, but just know that you wanna do dynamic stretches. So we also have videos like that, like what these called Frankensteins, or stuff that you're moving, right? Building that elasticity. And then you can do the static stretching at the end of your workout. And I actually suggest that, especially with people trying to build muscle. Like let's say you just got done with bench or chest press. I like to tell people to grab a lighter pair of dumbbells, and just hold it down in the lengthened position, kind of make some more room for the muscles to grow, also to bring blood flow. Another key about stretching, and I see this in the yoga world, being a yoga teacher for however long, 7 years at this point. People who are overly focused on flexibility and stretching and getting into these super cool looking on Instagram pretzel poses, they're like Gumby, right? They don't have any joint stability. They're just focusing on lengthening the tissues. You need to have some explosive characteristics of your tissues, right? As we get older, this is one of the first things that go, is our ability to contract the muscle forcefully and explosively, and then control that contraction. So if you're always stretching, or if you're always lengthening the tissues, then they're not gonna have that proper length-tension relationship to be able to work properly. And you're gonna be like Gumby with no strength. You can get into all these crazy positions, but then you're gonna hurt yourself. And I see that with a lot of yogis, especially in terms of hamstrings, right? Just take hamstrings for instance. People are always like, oh, I feel it in my hamstrings. I feel I got tight hamstrings. Most of the case, especially if you have, what's this called, this duck butt, this big, like this pelvic tilt, anterior pelvic tilt, and the lordosis, where you're just, and people say, oh, I feel my hamstrings. Stretching the hamstrings will be doing more harm than good. When you feel it in your hamstrings, they're locked long, right? So when we think of a tight muscle, all we think of is the muscle is shortened and tight. But a muscle can also be strained where it's locked long, where it's stretched and it's taut. That's like the ropey characteristic that we feel. So what are you doing if you're stretching? You're making it longer and longer. You're inhibiting it even more, which is gonna cause more of this dysfunction, because just take the example of hamstrings, attached from down to the knee, up into the sit bones, and then the fascia connects up into more. So if you're in this position, this thing about the attachment point is from here, you do this, it's getting longer. So stretch, you're gonna make that even worse. So stretching is not always indicated. A lot of times in case like that, you wanna strengthen the hamstrings. You wanna bring proper length-tension relationship. So stretching goes deep. Just know if you're just starting out, those traditional static stretches, save that for after your workout or completely separate from your training. Do dynamic warm-ups, prime the body for what you're gonna be doing in your training. And there's a lot more that goes into that. Feel free to ask questions in the comments.
I'll touch base real fast on that, actually. Just one point of 100% absolutely agree on everything that Coach Zach just said, but looking at it from the nervous system, when you static stretch, when you hold a stretch longer than 10, 15, 20 seconds, you're static stretching, you tell the nervous system to shut down and repair. Like that goes into like, okay, you're not priming your body for performance, whereas you're firing the nerves up, you're getting the blood flowing like that dynamic stretch, where your body's like, okay, we're about to do something, like let's get ready, right? You don't wanna go slow. When you're slowly holding, your body's not thinking that, okay, I'm about to go run. So you're slowly holding that hamstring stretch. Your body's not like, okay, well, I'm about to go do a dynamic movement for 3 miles, 4 miles. We have to think about it as far as like internally too. You know, obviously the muscles are internal, but what's happening with our systems in our body, and a lot of it is nervous system. So static stretching shuts the nervous system down. That's why it's so beneficial as well post-workout. It's telling our body, okay, shut down, it's time to recover. We are done with whatever we were doing, whatever intensity was going on, whether it was strength training, it was HIIT training, it was athletic-based training, functional training, whatever that might be. Like, shut down, let's repair. But in dynamic training, we don't want to shut it down. We want to get the blood flowing. We're saying, hey, wake up, let's go. Let's start moving. Let's get dynamic with our movements. Like he said, like if I'm doing lateral lunges that day, I'm probably gonna do a Cossack squat in my dynamic warm up, like doing those hip openers and just getting that lengthening of that muscle. But again, I always tell my clients, when you're dynamic stretching or dynamic warm up, we're not holding anything longer than 10 seconds. Like or I usually do 3. So like our 90-90, I count for my clients. 1, 2, 3, switch. 1, 2, 3, switch. 1, 2, 3, switch. Because the 90-90 feels so good on the hips. It's so common for people like, and they just sink into it. And we see that so often, like, hey, wake up. We don't want to shut the hips down. We want to open those hips up, get them ready, get the blood flowing. So maybe take that with you. Coach Tash, do you have anything to add to the stretch conversation?
No, I honestly, the biggest piece is just to make sure that you remember to stretch. I feel like so many people get into the gym. I've been guilty of this. That you get to the gym, you're like, you know what? I only have a little bit of time. Let me just jump right into it. And that's not good either, because you are just setting yourself up for a possible potential injury in the future. So making sure that you stretch, allocate enough time to get your stretching in and your workout and your recovery time as well. So
one more thing to add. Yeah, so post-workout stretching, that's kind of like I already touched on. That's when you would want to do some static stretching if you're going to do it. Like I said with the chest press, end with it. A pair of dumbbells just to kind of open everything up, restore that length-tension relationship. So yeah, static stretching post-workout. You can also do, more of like that hip flow, somewhat dynamic after, but that's when you want to do your static stretching. But just to add on to that, this is a little bit more of an advanced point to make about stretching. But the body is not too plain, right? The body is not two-dimensional. So when you are stretching, you want to think about stretching the body in all dimensions. So, for example, this is a basic example, hamstrings, right? Yeah, you can stretch the hamstrings toes forward. This is the most basic. But then what about internal, right? Bring it, then stretch the hamstrings in external. Get into all the different areas of the body. Like when you're doing a lunge, you can do some lunges when you train. Do some with internal, do some with external. The body is meant to be able to move awkwardly and be able to kind of handle that position. So when it comes to stretching, maybe expand, once you get to a certain point, expand your mind and being like, okay, let me stretch in all planes of motion. Like you can get into a pigeon pose, right? And lean forward, but then you can even think about tilting your hips. I can't do it here, but like these are your hips, kind of bring some of this into your hips and rotation into your hips. Like from here, you probably can't see, but like now I'm rotating my hips while I'm in this pigeon stretch. So stretching gets deep, but just start with the basics. Dynamic before, static after, and as Tasha says, the most basic you can get, don't forget to stretch.
That was our bench break. Between the benches. Hey, there we go. Our bench break between the bench. All right, stay tuned. We're gonna come back to you guys with some more topics. If you guys have any topics you would like to hear from the coaches, anything you want us to deep dive in, maybe we have the expertise to talk on it, maybe we don't, and it does give us time to do some diligent research too. I mean, I'm a student for life, so if you guys have something I don't know about, I will do the work for you, and I will dig deep, and I will become an expert, and I will hopefully be able to answer some questions. And I know the coaches share those exact feelings as well. So stay tuned. We'll see you guys next time.